Hi everyone, my name is Jaleesa Kenyon and I am the Social Sciences Librarian here at the University of Idaho. Thanks for being here today for our Getting Started with Zotero workshop for Graduate Student Essentials. Can everyone hear me okay on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Today's workshop is being recorded, and recording as well as my slides and a link to a feedback survey will be shared with everyone at the end of this session. And it will also be available, the slides and the link to the recording on the library's website. So what we're covering today is an introduction to citation managers, downloading the free desktop version of Zotero, collecting and organizing items, creating reference lists, and sharing Zotero group libraries with others. So the purpose of this workshop is to give an introduction to Zotero as a citation manager. And then if you have additional questions after this workshop and you want to dive more deeply into some of Zotero's advanced features or how you can use Zotero specifically for your own research, you could definitely reach out to me and schedule a meeting, and we can work together via email, in person, or via Zoom to answer any questions you might have. Okay, so citation managers are tools that enable you to store and organize references to a variety of different types of sources. These can be peer-reviewed journal articles, websites, news sources, books, theses and dissertations, patents, anything you can think of. They integrate with word processors such as Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Word on Mac, so that you can insert correctly formatted citations directly into your documents while you're writing and generate a formatted bibliography at the end. So a citation manager not only helps you collect all of the references you're finding, it also helps you generate reference lists in a variety of styles. The benefit of using a citation manager, especially as a graduate student, is that it's easy to switch back and forth between different citation styles. So you might be using a specific style within your thesis or dissertation, but then when you go to maybe publish an article with your advisor or another faculty member, you might end up needing to use a different citation style. So you can easily have all of that reference information in a single location and then change to different styles as you need to. So really quickly, I just want to show you a comparison page that we have on our library's website that looks at different citation managers. So to get to this page, you'd start at the library's homepage, click Research Guides, click Citing Sources, and then click Citation Management Software. So today, we're going to focus on Zotero. And I'll talk about the pros and cons of Zotero and why we've chosen to focus on this specific citation manager for today's workshop. But a few other options that are available to you are EndNote and Mendeley. EndNote comes in two different options. The first is EndNote Online, which is available to you as a U of I student. You access that by visiting this website on this page, and you would need to create a separate account through the Web of Science system, and then you can use EndNote Online. EndNote, the first version of EndNote listed here is the desktop app, and that costs approximately $250 to be able to use it on your computer. EndNote Online will only be accessible so long as you are a U of I student, or if you end up going to a different institution or getting a job somewhere else that has access to EndNote Online. Mendeley is another citation manager that's also free and includes an online portal as well as a desktop version. But today we've chosen to focus on Zotero because it's easier to use and learn and more robust than something like Mendeley, at least in our perspective. But depending on your discipline and your advisor and the faculty members you're working with, they might have a preference for which citation manager you use. So just keep that in mind. Because they might want you to use something like Mendeley or EndNote, so it's easier to share information between both of you rather than everyone using a different citation manager. Okay, so the benefits of Zotero as a citation manager is that it's completely free. All of the code is open source software and hosted on GitHub. So individuals can create modifications to make Zotero more useful for their specific scenarios and use cases. Another benefit of Zotero being completely free is that it's never tied to your U of I account. So even though EndNote Online requires you to create a separate Web of Science account to access it, to even get to Web of Science, you have to authenticate and log in with your Vandal username and password. So with Zotero, you don't have to worry about any of that. So you can take Zotero with you once you're done at the U of I and when you go to another institution. You can sync your data across multiple devices. Because Zotero is free, you can download the desktop app on a tablet, on your phone, on your laptop. You can access the online portal and have all of that information syncing, so you have access to your references wherever you are. It's easy to learn and use. You can create collaborative group libraries and share that information with colleagues and with researchers you're working with. You can add sources to Zotero in a single click using the Zotero connector, which works within your browser, and I'll show you how to install that. There's plugins for Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and LibreOffice. You can edit PDFs in the desktop app, which is something new that they created in one of their more recent beta versions. And it also includes useful online documentation. So if you're having any issues with Zotero, it's easy to find an answer and get assistance. Some of the cons of Zotero is that it does require a desktop or laptop or tablet application to use all of the features. You could sign up just for the online portal and be able to still collect references, but it's not as robust without the application that you actually download. Again, that download is free, but if that is something that's more difficult for you to do, Zotero might not be the best option for you. Let's see if I can close this notification right there. Another limit or kind of challenge associated with Zotero is that there's limited free cloud storage. So when you're pulling in reference information, you're likely not going to hit this 300 megabyte limit for storage, but you can choose a setting where whenever you pull in a reference, it takes a snapshot of the website at the time when you pulled that reference. It tries to find an open access version of the PDF and connect that to the reference. So if you're pulling in the actual source itself, in addition to the metadata, so the information about the source, you might reach that limited cloud storage capacity. The last limitation is that there is no first-party mobile app for Android. They have mobile apps for iPhones, but not for Android. So before we dive into an actual demonstration of Zotero, I just wanted to share some of its terminology. Within Zotero, the library is the main folder where all of your references are stored. Collections are subfolders with specific references within them. So within your whole library, you might have 1,000 sources. You might have multiple sub-collections based on your classes or your thesis research or different research projects with specific references within those. Items are the individual references that you have stored in Zotero. And then that connector is the browser extension that helps you create an item in Zotero. So let's go ahead and navigate to the Zotero website. So Zotero's website, zotero.org, is where you will come to download the Zotero desktop app and install the connector depending on the browser you're using. It's where you can get assistance and have questions answered via documentation, and where you'll also go to create that online account if you want to be able to sync your sources across multiple devices or share your libraries with colleagues. So to download Zotero, you just go to the home page and click download. It's going to know the version you need based on your operating system, as well as the version of the connector that you need based on the browser you're using. So you can download Zotero for Windows or for other platforms, include Mac OS, Linux, 32-bit, Linux 64-bit, as well as iOS. You can also install the connector for your browser, which is going to help you gather the reference information while you are looking for content online. Zotero has connectors for Firefox, Edge, and Safari. And if for some reason the installations don't work, you can get more information and help with their documentation. So once you get Zotero installed as a desktop version and then get this connector installed, the next thing you probably want to do is consider whether you want to create that online account. Because again, the online account is what allows you to sync your sources across multiple devices, as well as share content with others. So to create the online account, you would log in or register if you haven't done so already. I've already done that here. So I didn't have to write down my password. I was already able to have it logged in. And from here, I can view my web library, which includes all of my sources, as well as see some of the groups that I am a part of. So let's take a quick look at Zotero. I will go ahead and increase the font size so that people who are in person can see it a little bit better. Fortunately, when you increase the font size, it shrinks kind of everything else, so things look a little bit congested on the screen. But this is Zotero, so it looks like a lot is going on at once, and that's definitely true. We can see over here on the left-hand side is my library. So that's where all of my sources are stored. Everything that I've collected over time is available in my library. Right now, I have it being arranged by date that it was added to Zotero, but you can choose other fields to sort this information by. You can also add other fields by right-clicking and add more columns if that's important to you to see that information directly within Zotero as a system. These folders over here are those collections. So those subfolders of specific items that are already within my library. I have things related to research projects, things related to things I want to read, etc. As I scroll down, I can see these group libraries. So these are libraries that are being shared amongst multiple people who are working on a similar project. The benefit of a group library is once I find a source and it gets added to here, all of my colleagues can see it once they sync Zotero. And the same thing goes for them. Once they find a source and I sync Zotero, I can see all of the references that they've added as well. When I click on any reference, I'll see more information about that item. So let's see if I can stretch this a little bit. We'll see information such as the journal article, the title, the author, as well as the publication name, issue, pages, and date range. So this one was one that I pulled the metadata from a PDF, and we can see that it's not entirely correct, right? We see some issues where there really isn't a volume number listed. It's actually a name, so we need to make sure that's correct. And there are also some issues with maybe not having the DOI available, etc. So when you're using that online connector, sometimes the information doesn't always pull correctly. So you might need to go through and make small corrections to make sure the reference information is correct. Within Zotero, you can add notes to specific items. You can add tags if you need to, as well as identify related items. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this connector works. So to use the connector, I'm just going to visit the library's website and just do a basic search. We're just going to do land grant and Idaho. So once I search, I can do this a search anywhere. It can be in Google, Google Scholar, any library database, any other resource that we're looking at. As I'm going through, maybe I find this article, which was actually written by two of our colleagues in the library, Bruce Godfrey and Jeremy Kenyon. I'll go find the full text of this article. I'm already logged in through the library or through the university, so it's not asking me to enter my Vandal username and password. Once this page fully loads, I can see that there is a change up here to the connector. So this connector, it's very tough to see because it's small on the browser, but if you hover over it, it looks like a piece of paper and it says save to Zotero. Let me move this for a second so the people in person can see it. It's this little button up here at the top. So if this doesn't appear automatically when you install the connector, you can go into the settings within your browser and add a connector, just as you would to anything else as you're working with your browser. So to pull this information, I just click on this link, this little connector, and it's adding it to my library, since that was the folder that I had selected. We can see this article was pulled right here. And if I double click, it will take me back to the full text if I needed it. So this is really quick in grabbing this information, which is incredibly helpful and something that makes Zotero incredibly useful, is it pulls all of this metadata for you and allows you to then create a reference list in the future when you're ready to do that. Again, the quality of the metadata pulled and how it looks here is going to be based on the source itself. So it usually does really well if you're on a website or a journal article page or within our library catalog. Where it has more trouble is if you're trying to pull the metadata directly from a PDF. Sometimes that's where you get some of the incorrect information or where some of the information is missing. So now that you know kind of how that connector works in a very basic way, let me show you some of the features or preferences you can set in Zotero that will change how that connector works. So what you'll do, depending on your operating system, is you'll either click edit if you're on a PC. I think on a Mac, it's there's actually a preferences tab, or you go file preferences. But what you want to do is go into your preferences setting. And under general is where you can tell Zotero how to handle files. So right now, because I don't want to deal with storing the PDFs, since I can just get a direct link to the full text through our library or at the URL or get it through the DOI, is I don't have the box checked for automatically attach associated PDFs and other files when saving items. You can choose to do that if you want to. I've chosen not to. I have chosen to automatically retrieve metadata for PDFs, but I haven't, again, chose to take snapshots when creating items from web pages. Since I already have that online account created, if I go to the sync tab, we can see that I have a linked account through that Jaleesa Doni on my online version of Zotero. So if you wanted to sync to your online account, this will look a little bit different. There'll be a link to say link account. You'll enter your username and password and connect to that online version. You can choose to sync content automatically if you want to, but there's also this little, let's again, move this little green arrow, which manually syncs Zotero with the online server and then would pull down any changes as well. If we click Cite, this is where we can see the initial citation styles that have been added to Zotero. By default, it has some of the most popular ones like APA, Chicago, MLA, Harvard, etc. You can add additional styles as needed. So if we were to click Get Additional Styles, it's going to open a search box within Zotero and show the over 10,000 styles that are available to you. Most of these are very niche and connected to specific journals or specific professional associations. So you may, or may not need to even import any new styles, but you could always search for the name of a journal and see if something comes up. So we might search for something like sociology. Maybe I know that I am trying to publish an article in contemporary sociology. Here's an example of what that style looks like. If I click on contemporary sociology, it adds that as an option within Zotero for me to then use to create a reference list. So those are just a few of the preferences that you can set that help you connect and sync with the online version, as well as determine what content you want pulled down when you're gathering that metadata for specific references. Any questions about using the browser connector or setting those preferences?
I had a question about the syncing.
Yes.
So with the with the syncing automatically versus the full text, so what is the difference? Like, is one the PDF and one is just like the text that's on the web page, or I guess I'm just confused.
Yes, is it on this where it's the difference between sync automatically and sync full text content?
Yeah.
Yes, so what the difference would be is sync automatically would only sync the reference information you have stored in Zotero. But if you also had the sync full text content box checked, that would mean that if you yourself had been pulling down the website snapshots or the PDFs, that those actual documents that are connected to the references would be synced with the online server as well. So one of the challenges of having the full text content syncing is if you do have a lot of group libraries and everyone is syncing their full text content, is you might run into that storage limit. But just know that so long as you're syncing that top part automatically, if you are pulling that full text content, it will still be available on that initial computer or tablet where you had pulled the full text. It just might not be available as you might not be able to get the PDF that you had downloaded or the website snapshot if you access Zotero on another computer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's a great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let me show you a couple of different ways to add items depending on what you're finding. So if you are working with an item that's solely in print, maybe it's a newspaper, an item from special collections and archives, a journal article that your major advisor printed out for you and handed to you, and you don't want to then find the metadata online and pull it down using the connector into Zotero, you can manually add an item by clicking. There's this little green circle with a white plus sign that says new item. When you hover over it, by default, it's going to show you the item selection or item types that you use most frequently. But if you hover over more, you can see all of the options that are available to you. So if we wanted to add something like a book or a book section, like a book chapter, we could just choose that. We would put the title of the book. So we can say the title of the sections. We'd say like test chapter. We could put the author's name. So I'll put my colleague Hanwen, who's managing Zoom right now, as the author. We could then put the title of the book and then any other metadata information that's necessary for us to create an accurate citation. Once we do that, it's automatically added into Zotero. We don't have to click save or do anything like that. We can again add notes, add tags, things of that nature. We can also right-click on any of the references we have in Zotero and add an attachment. So if maybe we had taken more in-depth notes about a source and we wanted to add that as an attachment, we could do that. Maybe they just didn't fit in that note field. From here, we could add things to a specific collection, which again are those subfolders. We could also remove an item from a collection if we needed to, or move an item to the trash. So that's a way that you can create an item manually if you're not being able to pull that metadata online. Okay. If you needed to create a new collection, you simply click this new collection button over here on the left, and you can rename it. You can nest collections if you wanted to, and create multiple subfolder layers depending on what you're doing. You could also create a new group or a new feed within kind of a library that you're working with as well. But most of the time, based on the folks that we've worked with in the library, most people use a single My Library and then have different subfolders rather than using the feeds or the groups in that way. So if you wanted to create a group library, that's when you would need to navigate back to that online version of Zotero, sign in if you haven't done so already, click groups, and then click create a new group. So again, the benefit of a group library is that you can share the citations you all are finding with more than one person. You can't share a My Library collection, but you can share a group library. So we could choose a name for the group, like test. We could choose the membership. So if it's public and open, public and closed, or private membership. And then we could just create the group. So since this is private, we would need to add or specify a couple of different settings. And then once this is saved, we can actually start inviting people to this group. So we could add members by going under the members page here and seeing who's listed. And then under group settings is where we could add a few more members. So again, This may or may not be something that you're using depending on the work you're doing and your goals for using Zotero, but it is an option to share information with other folks. The only limitation is if you choose a private group, is that they have to be, or anything that has closed membership, they also have to have a Zotero account themselves. If it's public and open, anyone can find those groups online and you could just share the URL. But for them to add content to a private group, they would need to themselves have a Zotero account. Okay. So some of you, maybe you've used other citation managers before. Maybe you've used EndNote or Mendeley and you're like, oh, Zotero looks great, but I don't want to lose everything I've already collected. You can download the content from those other citation managers as an RIS file and import it into Zotero. And it will pull all of that information that you've collected before and add it to Zotero in the correct format so that it works within this system and within this platform. So there's lots of ways to add content, even if you've used a citation manager before. Okay, let's see if we can find an example of an item with a PDF. Okay, so one of my colleagues added this item to our group library and the PDF is available. So if I double click on the PDF, as I mentioned, one of the benefits of Zotero is that you can annotate PDFs directly within the system. So for this example, not only was the metadata about this item pulled, so the data about the source, the full text PDF was too. So I can actually go through here, read the article, and add things like highlights. I can add notes. I can select the area and do different things. So if annotating PDFs online and storing that information is something that you find beneficial, you can now do that directly in Zotero rather than having to have your PDF stored somewhere else and the annotation stored in a different place. Just remember, if you don't have that preference selected where you are syncing the full text content, other folks won't be able to see those annotations, and you also wouldn't be able to get that full text on a different device if you weren't syncing it. But it would still be stored in your main version of Zotero. Okay, so let's talk about creating reference lists. Depending on how long your reference list is going to be, there are a couple of different ways you can do this, and different ways kind of based on your preferences. So one way is to simply use the Zotero desktop app. You can choose the items that you know you're going to include in your reference list by highlighting all of them, by shift clicking, by control or command clicking, if you want to select different ones in different orders. And then you would simply, once you have these selected, you would right click and you would say create bibliography from items. This is where you would choose your style. And again, you might need to add a new one depending on where you're trying to publish something or what style you're using. You would then choose the output mode. So citations, which is a little bit confusing, would be those in-text citations. So it'll format things to cite them correctly in text, whereas bibliography would be that reference list or endnotes or footnotes, depending on the style. Your output method can be save as RTF, so save as a rich text format document, save as HTML, copy to clipboard, or print. Usually you can do copy to clipboard as long as you can be sure that when you paste it back in, it keeps all of the formatting since styles have italics and things like that. If you're at all concerned about the formatting being maintained, you can save it as an RTF file, which can then be opened in Word, in OpenOffice, in Google Docs, etc. So since I'm zoomed in so far in Zotero, we can't see it, but this is like an OK button down here and a cancel. So I'm just going to click OK. We saved it as an RTF. I'm just going to save it on the desktop. And then we can pull up this document and see what it actually looks like. So here it is. They've been alphabetized and formatted based on APA style. But what we can see initially, if you are a user of APA style, is that the article titles are formatted incorrectly. So instead of using sentence case for the article titles, it's capitalizing every single word. So we could go through and easily make these changes ourselves, but what would be more effective is to go into Zotero and actually edit the source here. So what we can do is if we click on an item, we can then right click in a field like title and change something to sentence case. So it will do it automatically for us right there without us having to go through and click each individual letter. So just keep in mind that when we do that, of course, Zotero, I don't think is at the point, I haven't tested it, but in the past, they haven't been at the point where they can recognize proper nouns. So if something in the title lists the name of a country or a person, it might not get that correct. So just make sure that if you go in here and you change something to sentence case, that you confirm that anything that's a proper noun is actually correct. So when I make this change, you'll see up here at the top right that it's going to start syncing right away as soon as I make that change. It does that little sync for us and it's going really quickly. If I was syncing manually, I would just need to push that button and it would do that sync, pushing it up to the online system and then pulling it back down next time I need it. So that's one way that you can create a reference list. The other way is to create it directly within the word processor. So when you install the desktop version of Zotero, it should automatically install the little application within Microsoft Word if you have that on your computer, and you can add it into Google Drive or Google Docs if that's what you're using instead. The documentation explains how to troubleshoot that if when you download the desktop version of Zotero, that those little applications within the word processor, if they don't work right away. So what you can do then, the first thing you might want to do is click Document Preferences. We're gonna zoom out just a little bit so it appears a bit clearer. You can choose your default citation style when you're working in a word processor, but again, you can easily change that at any time. So let's just maybe say we're gonna do the IEEE style. We will then zoom out a little bit more and then see that that's still set and click the X button to close. So I'll zoom in again so we can see things. To add a citation, you just click Add Edit Citation and click OK. And it's going to give you this little search box, which is going to search across all of Zotero. So you could search for a specific title, you could search for an author, you could search for the name of a collection if you knew you wanted to bring everything in. I'm just going to search for land grant. Then it's going to show me all of the items that mention land grant somewhere. I'll choose the one that I want to add in and then hit enter. And I have an in-text citation formatted for that IEEE style. When I'm ready to add my bibliography, I could keep adding in more in-text citations where I needed them in text. But when I'm ready to add in my bibliography, I click Add Edit Bibliography, and it will automatically format it based on that style, based on the number of in-text citations I've already added into Microsoft Word. We could change these at any time by going into Document Preferences, and it will continue to update if you were to add new in-text citations, then go in and add or edit the bibliography. So we could click in here and make any corrections if we needed to. But again, sometimes it's easier to make those corrections first in Zotero, make sure that information is correct before actually doing it in Microsoft Word or a different word processor. Any questions about creating those reference lists or those lists of citations? Yes.
Instead of manually going into individual records and right click to change a sentence case, is there a way to do that in batch. If you have like a bunch of
Right.
sentence cases you want to change all at once with a single click of a button, and such methods exist.
Yeah, I haven't looked into that, so I'm not sure if that's possible. There might be information within the documentation about doing those batch updates. But I think if you select multiple items, there's really no way to go in and kind of make changes, at least within this version. But the documentation might have information on how to do that, or since the code is open source, folks might have made a mod within GitHub where that is something that you can kind of make batch changes to that content. That's a great question, and something that would be very useful in a future release of Zotero if it doesn't exist already. Okay, so any questions about what you've seen about Zotero today so far? As you're working in Zotero, I know that I tend to get into literature rabbit holes and save multiple sources multiple times. Zotero identifies any of those items that are duplicates under duplicate items. And you can actually, like we have these two here, these two steins, you can merge the two items so that you don't have multiple versions of the same citation by clicking that and saying merge items. Zotero also, you can empty things from the trash. You could keep track of your publications if you wanted to have a separate section of things you've published. So you can easily make reference lists for resumes or CVs as you're going through. Each group library also has duplicate items, unfiled items, and trash. And you can add collections to any group library if you wanted to. Now, if you were using Zotero, but you wanted to move to a different citation manager, you can export the collection and then import it into a different manager if that was something that was necessary for you. There are a few different tools within Zotero, like you can create a timeline of the sources you found. You could install a browser connector if it was uninstalled for some reason. You can use some developer features, manage different the attachments that you have, etc. They also have some help documentation within Zotero, the desktop app, but a lot of that information will direct you to the online version of the documentation. Zotero automatically checks for updates, but you can manually do that if you think you might need to run an update. You can also search across Zotero within all of the fields and specific tags, or you could limit and just search within the title, creator, and year field, or everything, which would also search potentially within the full text if you've been pulling that data. So this was just a quick introduction to Zotero as a citation manager. Within the library's citation management page, we do have more information about Zotero. So pretty much everything I've covered today is documented here as well. How to download Zotero, a snapshot of the library and what these different areas look like. Information on adding new references, using the connector, importing from a manager, adding items by identifier like a DOI or an ISBN, adding references manually, organizing your citations. We talked about creating and managing those collections, sharing them, adding references, adding tags, etc., as well as information on writing and citing. So this includes creating that bibliography in Zotero, using the Zotero Word plugin, which I demonstrated, as well as how to use Zotero with Google Docs, if that's your preferred word processor. The Zotero documentation that's online will also include information that could be useful for you. They have some basics in all of these areas, as well as more information about word processor integration if you're using different systems than Microsoft Word or Google Docs. Their documentation is extremely robust, so you can definitely take a look at this if you are hoping to do something more advanced with Zotero or just need a recap on how to use this system. Okay, any final questions about Zotero? All right. Well, if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email. I'd be happy to talk with you or schedule a meeting. We can work together via email too. We also have future graduate student essentials workshops, same time, same place, either in person or live via Zoom coming up in the next 4 weeks. So please consider signing up for these if these topics are of interest to you. And again, if there's any issue with like timing for these, if you register, you'll get an email with the recording and the slides, but all of that information is also available on our library's website. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate you being here in person and live on Zoom. Thanks.